I was thinking about procrastination because it's considered a shameful thing with human beings. Procrastination is usually related to something that's going to happen in the future. And there's part of you that's excited about it. When you go to take action on it, you're not excited about it. And so you're stuck. You're delayed. And I was telling Dean about this. And I said, I've been thinking about something. I think the reason we procrastinate is the thing we're thinking about is very good, but we're not the one to do it. And therefore we're saying it's good and it'll be great when it's achieved, but we're not the one to do it. And that's where it came from, the who, not how concept.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Dan Sullivan with us. Dan is the founder and president of Strategic Coach, a visionary. He's an innovator. He's a gifted conceptual thinker. He's been spending over 40 years doing speaking, consulting, strategic planning, and coaching to entrepreneurial individuals and groups. He's co-author of 10X is Easier Than 2X, Who, Not How, and The Gap and the Gain, among others. Dan, it's so great to have you on the show.
Stephan, thank you very much. And actually August, which is just a few months off from our record here this morning, now it'll be 50 years since I've been coaching. I started in August of 1974. And so it's been 50 years.
That's amazing. How's it feel?
Well, it feels good. Quite a passage of time because, and I think it's fairly significant, the reason why I do what I do. I was a writer in an ad agency, Canadian terms, a very big ad agency. It was part of BBDO, which is a global, one of the big 10 global systems advertising. But I've always been quite a voracious reader of things that don't have any immediate use to me. And I just started noticing around 73, 74 that a new word had really entered into the language, which was microchip. And then I dug a little bit deeper, a little harder in those days. We didn't have search engines. And I went back and, got in touch with the stuff that was being done. Fairchild, one that was really one of the first big companies that was doing integrated circuits. And Gordon Moore, who of course became very famous for not so much a prediction, it was actually a question that he just noticed in 3 stages of growth of integrated circuits that computing power was doubling each time you did it, and that the cost of computing actually was going in half. So you got a sort of 4 times payoff every time you did it. And it just intrigued me. And then there's some great articles that started being written. New York Times had a wonderful science and technology writer in the early 1970s. And he was projecting what this new invention was going to do to all existing inventions. And I think his predictions were largely accurate. But the reason why I'm telling you this about the microchip is that one of the predictions he made is that entrepreneurism was going to be much more central to life than it had been before 1974, and that these marginal creatures, entrepreneurs, periphery of large corporate life and everything else, were going to become much more in the center of things. And the reason is because they would be quicker to use microtechnology than the big corporations. And the speed of innovation was going to increase, become very uncomfortable for bureaucratic decision makers. They wouldn't be able to keep up with the speed of innovation. And I'd say, looking at the last 50 years, that's largely been true.
Yeah. One of my favorite authors is Neil Stephenson, and he wrote What It's Like Where Brands Kind of Rule the World, and then post molecular nanotechnology, where nanomachines will be able to replicate themselves, and how different of a world we'll live in. And it's such a short time away. Are you familiar with either of those books or that author?
Yes, a long time ago I read. I read them still in the realm when science fiction was interesting, and then science became more interesting than the fiction. And I read. I grew up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and science fiction ruled the world in those days. But because you didn't have the actual science and technology really outpace writing of science fiction plots and themes, it seems like reality is what was fictional is becoming reality.
Yeah. What's that quote about science? Science fiction indistinguishable from magic. Oh, Arthur C. Clarke. Yeah. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, and I think one of the aspects that speed is magic. You just think of the motion pictures. In the old days, they're not that way anymore, but when motion pictures first came, it was just still there were just a lot of them, and they were going very, very fast. So I think that the element of technology that is confusing for a lot of people is that the great trump card that technology has is speed, and it fools humans into thinking that things that are made up are actually real.
Like what? What would be an example?
Well, there's sort of a joke that in your phone, the phone today, that if you took all the technologies that have been packed into the phone, probably since 2008 when the iPhone came out, if you actually had to put a price tag on all the different technologies that are now in this very little object that you can put in your pocket, maybe like $2 trillion, but you have availability to it. And you're accessing an enormous speed, things that used to take weeks, months, or not at all to get and you're sitting there and say, come on, come on, come on, come on. And that is, every time things speed up, it probably wows you for the first 24 hours. And then you're saying, can't you do this any faster? So I think there's a drug-like quality. First hit of the drug you get on day one, amazing. But by day 5, you're saying, isn't there something more stronger? Isn't there something more powerful? So it's very addictive. I mean, I have to say that I'm not really subject to that because I tend to keep very smart humans between me and the technology. I like to know what the technology does, but I don't have any overriding need to be the master of the technology because there are people who I work with and people that I know who do this a lot. Their mastery of this is much greater than mine. So I take advantage of their mastery, and I'm just put my emphasis on being a good prompter or a good asker of questions. Well, does it do this? Yeah. And
Well,
I'm just
that's your
playing with
concept of who, not how. You get the
who,
right
not
who's in the
how.
room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have positive expectancy about the future because things are changing so rapidly?
Yeah, I'm very, very positive, and because I think first of all, I'm 80. I just turned 80, and I've gone through a lot of change in my life, which turned out positive. I'm a radio guy. I mean, I didn't see television until I was 9 years old. And so, I remember the changeover when radio was no longer interesting, then television, and then the various changes that television has gone through and everything else. So I'm pretty used to the change, and I'm not a cutting edge user of new technology, but I'm sufficiently close to the interesting people. And I have a lot of them as entrepreneurs who are clients of Strategic Code. So I just stay in touch with how they're thinking about it. What's the cost benefit of what you're doing? You're investing a lot in it. Are you getting a return on it? Yeah. So, I know it's always going to be changing. I know there's always going to be new technology. I have a podcast series with Peter Diamandis. It's called Exponential Wisdom. And I said, Peter, you're going to supply all the exponentials and I'm going to provide all the wisdom. And he said, can you imagine, he says, when this artificial intelligence is as smart as us, the singularity moment when artificial intelligence, can you imagine what that day is going to be like, Dan? And I said, yeah, I can. He says, what's it going to be like? I said, it'll feel just like another day. It'll be normal. I said, humans normalize change. We don't like things that aren't normal. So if something new happens, we normalize it. We just said, here's a way of looking at it that it's not too much different from what we were doing before. And I think that there's a real division in society. I think there's probably a real division in society who thinks that these new technologies are changing everything about human existence. But they really haven't spent much time actually studying, how humans have progressed over thousands of years. There's an enormous intelligence that's been created, especially in the Western world, more in the Western world, simply because it takes the form of a conversation. There are classes in universities, there's political circles today where they're referring to Aristotle, they're referring to Plato, and everything like that. So we have a comfort with the thinking of people over a span of a couple of thousand years. And that's one of the ways that we normalize things. I kind of get what Plato was after here, as if he's in the next room.
Well, the concept I love of Plato's the most is the cave.
Yeah.
Where do you know about Plato's cave?
Yeah.
First of all, maybe explain it for our listener.
Yeah, well, Plato said that what we think is reality is just a shadow on the wall, because we're in a cave and the sunlight is coming into the cave and it's casting shadows on the wall, and we think those shadows are reality. Yeah. And the goal of the lover of truth is to realize that you're in the cave. You should make your way toward the entrance so that you can be out in the sunshine itself. And that's reality. And it's a cool selling line when you think about it,
You don't buy it?
No, I don't. I don't really. And I think that there's a whole history of Plato and who he was. And he's famous because of Socrates, a character called Socrates. But we don't actually know what Socrates said, because it's all through the voice of Plato. And Socrates actually changes. I've read all of the dialogues. I went to a college where you just read philosophy, and we read all those things. And I think that he was an aristocrat who was really landed aristocrat in Athens, who was very afraid of all the changes that were being brought in, because Athens was a trading city and all these ideas were coming into the marketplace in Athens and everything else. So I think he wanted to say, well, regardless of all the changes, there's a superior form of thinking and a superior form of being. So, he had his own coaching program.
Yes, he did. So this concept of living in an illusion or simulation, sounds like you're not buying it, but have you had?
Well, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it in Plato's words, and I'm not buying it in the Elon Musk's words that we're all living in the Matrix and everything else.
He actually said it's a 1 in billion chance, or 1 in billions chance, that we're living in base reality. Most likely, of course, is that we're living not in base reality. And I'm just curious if you have had
my advice for Elon is speak for yourself. I think I've got a pretty good grasp of reality, insofar that I've got fans who take how I think about things seriously. And the program's 35 years old, and it grows every year.
Yeah, and it's fabulous. I've taken it.
And we've got some solid concepts that people find very useful. It makes them, keeps them more focused as individuals. They become, more happily productive. I would use the term that they're kind of happy and they're productive, and they have a more balanced life than they had previous to being in the coach program. But they're all entrepreneurs. I don't coach anyone except fairly successful, to begin with, entrepreneurs. And but I think we're just in a major shift. One of them is obviously technological, but I think the other one is geopolitics, because you and I were born. I was born actually a little bit before the deal that the United States did with the world at the end of the Second World War. And essentially the U.S., which was half the global economy, the U.S. economy was half the global economy in 1945 at the end of the war. And Americans really don't like seeing taxpayers coming back in coffins. There's just a dislike of America being involved overseas with conflicts that they don't really comprehend. And they could see immediately, I mean, in 44, a year before the war ended, they knew that there was going to be a major standoff with the Soviet Union. And they pulled off one of the greatest geopolitical tricks in human history. They basically had a conference. It was in New Hampshire. It's very famous, called Bretton Woods. And they established basically a 3 or 4 part agreement on how the world was going to be reorganized after 1945. And one was the dollar was going to be the reserve currency, which it remains today. And the other thing was that the U.S. would lend any amount of money that you wanted to rebuild your economy. You could make products. You could ship them safely across seas because the U.S. Navy would provide guarantee of shipping lanes. You could sell your products into the U.S. without tariffs. And all those were really, really a new thing on the global scene. And it lasted, but was only for one reason. It was to prevent the further expansion of the Soviet Union. So they created an iron curtain, and America created a prosperity curtain to blunt the influence of the Soviet Union. And I remember when the Soviet Union collapsed, it started with the wall coming down in 1989, and then 1992, actually, the Soviet Union disbanded as the Soviet Union. It just went back to being Russia. And it was the greatest human event that was not reported or commented on. Nobody, it's just like, oh, did you see the Soviet Union collapse? Oh, yeah. How'd the hurricanes do last night, And the thing that was really interesting about it is it was such a good deal, and people suspected that the Americans would stop providing everybody with the deal, that nobody brought it up, none of the foreign leaders. It was just the sweetest deal in the world. And the U.S. didn't really do it for economic reasons. It was for security reasons. It wasn't economic, because the U.S., even today, I think the percentage of the GDP that it's involved foreign trade is about 12% of the U.S. Americans just make stuff for Americans, and they have the biggest consumer economy in the world. And a lot of this is intertwined with technology, the technology breakthrough. And this is not original thinking on my part. There's a great thinker by the name of Peter Zion who's written 4 amazing books on this. And he said that basically, at a certain point, the U.S., once the Soviet Union wasn't there, they just decided we're pulling back. We're going to bring our manufacturing back to the U.S. We're going to, have as much that is crucial to the American economy, and that we're going to bring it back. And they've been doing this now for since 1992. And but the beauty of the global economy and the global system is falling apart. Supply chains and everything's are slowing down, and the U.S. has decided, I think, pretty much top to bottom, that China is the next big problem. And we're going to not give them such a great advantage into the U.S. marketplace. And, so anyway, and the U.S., is an ADD country. Every day, millions of things are going, but every once in a while, an issue gets everybody's attention, and then they hyper focus. I'm ADD, so I kind of know how it does, but it's an amazing country. But the reason I'm saying this is that everybody thinks that technology changes things, but politics really changes things, and international trade really changes things, and international security really changes things. Technology is a major player at the table, but it's not the only player at the table.
Right. And when you said you're ADD, you're actually, you've gotten tested and you've gotten that diagnosis?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went to the Amen Clinic, Daniel Amen is.
Right. He's been a guest on the show. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and he saw my scans, and he said, I've heard that you're smart. I don't know how you've done it with such a shitty brain.
I don't know that he said exactly those words, but
No, he actually did say those words. Yeah, yeah, and but a lot of what I've created in Strategic Coach and what our team has created are a series of thinking tools, Stephan. I mean, if you think of Strategic Coach, it's this expanding universe of thinking tools where there's a central concept called unique ability, that an individual has a unique ability. And I think it's factory equipment. I think you're born with this. But the world around you wasn't invented to support your unique ability. Okay, so you have to spend your life negotiating with the world. So what you do really well, what you love doing, what other people find valuable. You got to negotiate with the world. You got to figure out a business model for what you do for a living. And that's what strategic coach is. And then in this situation, here's a good way to think about it. In this situation, so it's a series of thinking tools, and we're up to 250 now after 35 years. And the Patent Bureau in Washington likes these. So we've gotten 30 patents in the last year. And I'm very influenced by my philosophical readings, Plato going back to the Greeks and everything else, that I'm actually a modern day philosopher, I think. I think I'm sort of a philosophic.
is that your unique ability?
Yeah, I think enabling other people to think about their thinking is my unique ability, and I get great joy out of that. When you're in the workshop, Stephan, and I ask questions, and you're sitting there, and I'm watching you writing, and then we have frequent breakout groups where you talk about what you're writing. I never know what you wrote down, but I can tell by your excitement, I can tell by your energy that your thinking was good for you, and that's my joy. My joy is that you were thinking about it one way, it wasn't working for you. I've provided a new thinking tool that if you use it, now you're very excited about what's happening, and that's my reward.
Yeah.
That's very philosophical. I mean, I'm not selling meat patties.
Well, yeah, that's very meta. Thinking about one's thinking is kind of like being aware of one's awareness.
Yeah. And that's the thing that is not being approached, I think. I remember Ray Kurzweil, I was at a conference a dozen years ago, and he was making his usual singularity prediction, when all the technologies come together, they'll be much more intelligent than human intelligence. And I went up to him at the break and I said, when you're talking about human intelligence, are you talking about consciousness? And he says, nobody knows what consciousness is. And I said, well, I think it has something to do with human thinking. I think it has something to do with human intelligence. And one of the things, this has been a pet project of me, and it's much easier to do today because of search engines and because of the AI. There's been no progress made in the last 40 years on understanding human consciousness. There's zero. People who are in that scientific area, which involves psychology and neuroscience and everything else, they've made absolutely no headway in the last 40 years. They don't know what consciousness is. But we wouldn't be having this podcast if you weren't conscious and I wasn't conscious.
Right. And then there's the collective unconscious too, where we're connected. I think you're a fan of Carl Jung, right?
Yeah. Well, certainly much more than Sigmund Freud.
I would hope so. Yeah.
Carl Jung was just, he was a pleasure to read because I think he was a very benevolent spirit. I think he had he wanted well for the human race. He was really, really interested in people's sense of well-being about how they were living their lives. And I'm that way. I truly do want the best for whoever I'm working with.
So Carl Jung came up with not just the collective unconscious as a concept, but the concept of synchronicity. Mm-hmm. How do you see synchronicity showing up in your life?
You know it when you've heard a good joke. Yeah. I was actually not the word that you're using, but I was thinking of this, what I would say this in really good theatrical performances or really good musical performances. It's quite amazing of what 1,000 people in an audience will get into the same dimension. And it's different from listening to music alone or watching theatrical performance. There's an added. I was in London about a month ago, and we went to see Barry Manilow, and he's been at it for a long time. He's 81, so he's a year older than me, and he's been on stage for 46 years. He wasn't always a singer. He was a songwriter, and then he became very famous for his songs for other people. And then at a certain point, he's got a good voice and he's a good musician. And he put out an album that was famous, and he became famous. But one of the things, Stephan, that really amazed me is the relationship that he has with his audience. So this was a theater in London called the London Palladium, which is very famous theater. And his very first big concert when he was in his 30s was at the London Palladium. You know, he had been getting famous, then he went to London and he had the Palladium. So this was the first time he was back in 46 years. But what struck me about it was that he's got fans who've probably seen him 100 concerts. And so when you walk in the door, they give you a glow stick, you know, one of the glow sticks. And then there's a real structure to the performance. And the way it works is that when he sings a fast song, everybody in the audience stands up and sings the song with him. When it's a slow song, you sit down and you listen to him. And he's got this completely worked out relationship with his audiences. And I said, what an amazing trick he does. But I hadn't really paid attention to his music at all. You know, he's not someone that I'd really, but I recognize the music. I've heard the music. I just didn't know it was Barry Manilow. But one of the things that really struck me is just this amazing oneness about the audience. You know, both their reason for being there was a oneness, their participation in the songs and everything like this. And what I've said is that even though we're individuals and we're very complicated and we're very complex, you could study one human being forever and you wouldn't get to the bottom of what makes that person unique. We do have this ability at certain moments to just join in with other human beings as if we're one entity.
Yeah. Or, you know, I think of starlings and murmuration, where it's a flock that is so perfectly in unison. It's just it's a beauty to watch.
Yeah, and but I think it's I think synchronicity is more explainable that it's a mysterious thing. I think it's just organisms getting used to each other over a long period of time. But you can see it in traffic patterns. I mean, you have an amazingly busy open space, like it's a marketplace or something, thousands of human beings there, but there's no collisions. There's no collisions at all.
Yeah.
And one day we were on the freeway. There's a freeway that takes us in a matter of about 15 or 20 minutes from our office to our home. And I was just sitting there and I was saying, it's amazing. Everybody's doing 60. You know, there's hundreds of cars going, you know, both ways. And I bet people aren't giving much thought to what they're doing. You know, I mean, you've probably had the experience of driving from here to here, and not once were you conscious that you were driving. We had built it into our habit system, our automatic system. And the other drivers weren't thinking that much, but we had really adjusted ourselves to other people's behavior. And I don't think that's mystical. I just think the birds they found, they used to think that a flock of birds there was a master brain that controlled the birds. But it's actually a series of rules they learn about the bird in front of them, the two birds on either side of them, two birds above and below. And if that bird does this, you do this, and they just do this. So, but it happens fast. It happens very fast. And as we mentioned before, I think speed has magic to it.
Mm-hmm. But there are these things that are incredible coincidences. And that's really what I understand synchronicity to be, is that the outer world and the inner world meet. Like you're thinking about somebody and you hadn't spoken to that person for 20 years. And then as you're thinking about them, they call you.
Yeah. I believe in radio waves.
You know the story about how Carl came about to write a book about synchronicity and do all that research? You know how it all started?
Yeah. Yeah, what you're talking is something very different from what I was experiencing with.
Yeah. But let me tell you the story of how he came about writing about synchronicity and doing all the research on it. So he was in his office with a patient, a client, doing analysis on them as a woman. And she was doing a dream recall, and she was talking about how in this dream there was a gold scarab beetle necklace that was significant in this dream. And as she's recalling that, there's this tap on the window, and it's 3 stories up. So who's tapping on the window? There weren't any trees with branches nearby either. And it was very incessant. It was like insistent, really, really wanting to his attention. And so he goes to the window and opens the window, and guess what flies in? Scarab beetle.
A bird with a necklace.
No, that'd be funny, but no, it was a scarab beetle.
Wow.
And he thought, well, this isn't by chance. There's something very interesting here going on. And he was able to catch it. And he presented it to the woman as like, here's your scarab beetle. And she was surprised and certainly made an impact on her life. But of course, it made a lasting impact on Carl Jung's as well. That started him on that whole journey of documenting synchronicities, coming up, coining the term, and then finding real data and analysis to this concept.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to the central concept that we have in Strategic Coach of unique ability, it was very clear to me from reading Jung that he had this ability to access his subconscious much better than other people. We're all born unequally. We have talents, we have interests, we have preoccupations that are unique to the individual. I forget what it was, some science fiction writer. He says reality and the universe are not only stranger than we imagine, they're stranger than we can actually imagine. They're beyond imagination. And my sense is that there's a constant about that, about what we know and what we don't know. Einstein was really good at coming up with very simple models which explained, very profound factors. And one of the reasons was he was a patent clerk. When he was paying his way through university in Germany, he was a patent clerk. And he would instantly grasp what the patent did, but he thought it was poorly communicated. And he'd come up with little analogies and that he would pass along with the patent, and he had a very high record of success with the patents because he instantly grasped it technologically and grasped it scientifically. But he says, you got to tell a story with this to get it across. It's not completely obvious what it is. And he said that he starts off and he says, if you think of a golf ball, the inside of it is everything we know, but the outside of it is connected to everything we don't know. And then he says, take a baseball, much bigger than a golf ball, inside everything we know, surface area, what we don't know. And he says, it doesn't matter how much we know, the amount that we don't know keeps expanding at the same pace. So I think it's a hard thing for people to do individually, and especially in professions, to believe that in a certain sense you aren't getting anywhere, because everything you're grasping now simply acquaints you with the things that you don't know about what you're doing. And I think we like stories, and stories have a beginning, middle, and an end. The story of humanity, I think we don't know where the beginning, the middle, or the end is.
Yeah. It was Werner Heisenberg who came up with that quote that you mentioned earlier. Not only is the universe stranger than we think, it is stranger than we can think.
You have a quote engine there, I can tell.
I'm pretty good at searching.
I bet. So tell me about searching. Stephan's search. Where does Stephan's search start?
It's funny because a book that
I sense you're a philosopher.
I am, yeah. So what really excites me is the belief and understanding that we're accessing the universal Google just by thinking and just by being conscious. So that universal intelligence. And I remember this one little scene from a show on Netflix with a famous psychic. It's a life after death kind of documentary, and this famous psychic Tyler, he's not able to think of the word, and I watched this happening, and I'm thinking he's going to ask because he's psychic, right? He's like the word is on the tip of his tongue, but he can't think of it. And I to this day I know that word now because I accessed it. I just asked for the answer and it's eloped. So it's amazing that their memory is getting worse over time, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. For me, I recognize that I don't have to retain memories. I can just access them. Mm-hmm. And this one profound moment that really made a huge difference in my life was it was not too long after I did 40 Years of Zen. So you know that program of Dave Asprey's, right? 40 Years of Zen. Have you done it?
No, I haven't.
That's really cool.
I know. Yeah. I know Dave.
Yeah. So that's a really cool program. It's a week-long program. You're hooked up to all these wires and getting a lot of neurofeedback. So your brain is learning at an unconscious level, and you're getting into more synchronous states between the hemispheres of the brain. You're getting into more flow states, into more alpha and theta, and sometimes even gamma brainwave states. And I got this incredible experience of remembering a beautiful memory from my childhood I had not remembered since my childhood. And I was not expecting that. And my childhood was really, really quite difficult. It's like, there's a movie in that, it's just not a childhood that I have a lot of fond memories about. So it was quite a gift to get that. Well, Fast forward some months later, I'm in my car driving, and my family's in the car, my wife, my young son, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, they're all asleep. And so I can't put on a podcast, can't put on music. And so I start talking to God and having a conversation with God. And I ask at some point, can I have some more memories like I had at 40 Years of Zen? More positive memories of my childhood, because I had very, very few. And easily 10 times the number of incredible positive memories that I got at 40 Years of Zen just flowed in. They just got downloaded into me. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going 70 miles an hour, on the freeway, and what an experience that was. So it's like we're accessing that universal intelligence, that universal Google, infinite intelligence, and we're the dumb terminal, and we give so much emphasis to the brain and brain chemistry and the structures and so forth. And I've gone to Amen clinics. I've gotten the SPECT scans and all that sort of stuff. I've done a lot of the biohacking things, not just 40 Years of Zen and Amen clinics. I do health nucleus. I've done stem cell therapy with Dave Asprey's stem cell doc. Dr. Harry, and it's just, I love that stuff. But this is, for me, the most profound thing.
Well, and it certainly relates to what you do for your profession, your occupation. Yeah, I'm interested because I don't find too much different between my interaction with AI, and I'm not somebody who needs to know 25 different apps. I find Perplexity very satisfying because the answers that come back are very, very useful, very useful. Yep. And I've got a particular format that I've developed. Give me the 10 main reasons why such and such happens. For example, I was saying, because we're in election season, and I just said, because everybody's saying, we're going to have a third party that comes along in the U.S. elections. And that's happened. There's been third parties that caused one of the major parties to lose because they took away votes, on one side of the spectrum, and consequently the other side won. But I just asked the question, why are there only two major political parties in the country? And that's been true right since the beginning. Okay, they've changed. The parties have changed, and some parties have fallen apart and been replaced by another party. But there's just only two when you get to the election, and you go 10 reasons why and everything like that, and the whole point, they give you their source with each one of them. So if you want to read the source, they can do it. And but it was my question. And I think we're the prompters. We're the humans are the prompting species. I mean, you're talking to God. I mean, God's been there, ready to, whatever it is. Yeah, I find God a comfortable concept, so I do it. I have a good relationship with God. We're both busy. We'll compare notes later.
Yeah.
And but the big thing but just asking your brain to find something, I think, is a very, very great skill. I think it's a marvelous skill. And I too I've not done what you did. I didn't have the example, but I write a lot, and I'm a very prolific writer. I'm on book 55 right now,
It's amazing.
And not big books, but kind of very concise one idea books. And I'll do some work, and then I'll do what we have a little, the impact filter is a major tool in Coach. But there's a small version of it, which you filled in for the podcast today. And what I'll do, I'll say tomorrow morning when I get up, everything's going to be solved about this chapter. This is going to happen. 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 Then I go to bed. I get up in the next morning, and everything is just the way I said it was going to be. People talk, we're not good at communicating with each other. I said the main problem is that we're not very good at communicating with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Or even telling the truth to ourselves. I love that quote you came up with, that all progress begins by telling the truth. And I think
actually, that's not mine. That's Bill Wilson. I'm very strict about who said what, and
that's good. That's important. That's integrity. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill Wilson was one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was a central belief. All progress starts by telling the truth. So the reason why you're suffering from this addiction is because you're not telling the truth. So in order to free yourself from the addiction, start telling the truth. It's all lies. Basically all addictions really come from lying.
Is there a correlation with procrastination? Because I know you've written and talked a lot about procrastination too.
Yeah, I have a very good friend, Dean Jackson. He's a marvelous conversational partner, and he's really, really innovative, very innovative. I call him the marketing Buddha. He seems like Buddha, he just ponders and then he'll deliver some blazing insight. But I was thinking about procrastination because it's generally considered a bad thing. It's generally considered a shameful thing with human beings. I mean, they'll confess to a serial murder before they'll confess to procrastination, And I said, I think, how can something like this that humans do be bad? I just pondered my mind. I said, there must be some sensible reason why we procrastinate. And I'm sure there's many different reasons why we procrastinate, but the particular line of thinking I was saying, I think that you get excited. Procrastination is usually related to something that's going to happen in the future. It's an achievement, or it's a goal, or it's a result in the achievement. And there's part of you that's excited about it. But then when you go to take action on it, you're not excited about it. And so you're stuck. You're delayed. And I was telling Dean about this. We he lives in Florida now. He lives in Orlando, but before COVID, in large sections, he would live in Toronto, and we would meet at some restaurants on Saturday. And I said, I've been thinking about something. And I told him, I said, I think the reason we procrastinate is the thing we're thinking about is really good and it's very good, but we're not the one to do it. And therefore, we're saying it's good and it'll be great when it's achieved, but we're not the one to do it. And therefore, it has to be. And that's where who, not how came from, the who, not how concept. It's a great goal, but I'm not the who's going to actually do this. And that's been a blockbuster concept for a strategic who, not how. Do you have the who can actually do that? And what it does is it takes off the pressure for everybody that you're supposed to be good at everything, that you're supposed to be doing everything. And I think that's a real cause for all sorts of mental difficulties, the notion that you're supposed to be good at everything and that you're the person who's supposed to do everything.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming to think you have to be the linchpin in your business, for example, and then you have a concept of the rugged individualist, versus somebody who's able to either simplify or multiply and have that self-managing organization or business. You can't run that as a rugged individualist.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just had an achievement that happened, a company achievement that just happened, and it's the best example so far of what you just said, and that, there were other skills, other people's capabilities that got into it. So we did our first conference outside of the company. For 35 years, everything we've done is just a workshop, where it's something inside. But here we created a conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and they have this marvelous venue right in the middle of the city called Music City Center. And so we had two team members that I work with a lot, and they said, we're going to create a conference. It's about time, after 4 decades of strategic coach members, we have, I think, 23,000 is the number right now who have been in coach, down at least a year in coach. And I said, we're just going to put out the word that we're going to have this conference. It was about a year in the future. And they did. It was a huge success. We had about 350. They had a lateness to their marketing, and people's schedules were filled up. But it was spectacular spectacular. I mean, we got amazing feedback from everybody who came. And when we got finished and we were having a big party at the end of the final day, Nashville knows how to put on parties. And I was reflecting that I had, in a year of its formation, that I spent 5 hours on that entire conference.
That's pretty cool.
And when I went to the conference, I participated just like the paying guests. I just went from session to session, had to choose my sessions and everything else. And yet the impact of that event on the confidence of the company, the confidence of our strategic coach community was profound, and it was two people, and they enlisted the skills of an event company who could negotiate with everything that was necessary for a great 2-day conference. And that's a real ideal of mine, is that our company is capable of great achievements that I'm not involved in.
Well, you're like the alchemist who brings together all the essential ingredients and sees the vision, and then everybody around you makes that happen.
And I have to tell you, you want to do more of that when you're 80 than when you're 70.
Right.
I think it was at 70, it was 10 years ago, I recognized that I'm going to be responsible for far more achievement in the future than I have been so far, but I'm not going to be very, very much involved in the actual doing of the achievement. It's going to happen through other people. And that's a way of defeating the idea that you should be retiring because you're not doing very much anymore. You're doing amazing things. It's just it doesn't take the form of what you did at the beginning of your career when you did everything. You were very active and you did this and you did this. Some of it great, and some of it you shouldn't have been involved with it. And I've gotten to the point now where it's all teamwork. It's all teamwork. And my job is to make sure that people are clear about what they're doing.
That's awesome. And congratulations to you and to your team.
Yeah, and they're going to do another one twice as big 2 years from now. So, and that was funny because it was my birthday, so it coincided pretty close to my birthday. Part of the reason for the party was my birthday. And so near the end of the evening, they thrust a microphone in and say, say something. So I got up and I said, this has just been an amazing experience the last 2 days. And we didn't have any plans beyond this conference, but I'm saying right now that we're going to have another conference, but it's going to be 2 years from now, and it's going to be twice as big. And the whole room went, crazy. I mean, there were, it was alcohol enabled. This was a very alcohol enabled experience for everybody. But that was important for me to do. That little 15-minute statement actually just galvanized the whole company. And next week, we can't get into Nashville 2 years from now. They're all taken up. But it's probably going to be in Orlando. And our two organizers will be in Orlando next week to look at 3 different venues, which, almost 2 years before we're going to do that.
Yeah.
But
that's a great forcing function. Like, announce to all your Facebook friends that you're going to run a marathon or whatever. And it's like, you can't, you can't weasel out of that one.
No, you got to declare yourself. Yeah. I was starting to ask you a question, but you very skillfully shifted the attention. But where did your interest in search really come from? I mean, there's obviously a whole bunch of skills that developed before they showed up as the technological ones and your understanding of the technology. But where would you say, if you had to have 3 events which very, very clearly got you to where you are right now, what would you say they were before you actually started doing this?
Yeah. Well, as far as search, it was writing my own bulletin board system, or BBS, as a kid in BASIC from the ground up. I did a lot of late nighters to do that, and then ran that on my home phone line, which really irritated my mother. And
where was this?
This was in Toledo, Ohio.
Oh, in Toledo, yeah.
Yeah. And then, many years later, I'm studying biochemistry in a PhD program, and I go to an conference called the Second International World Wide Web Conference. And one of the people I get to chat with is a guy named Rob McCool. And he was the creator of Netscape Server and Apache. Apache, which runs most web servers on the planet now, between that and Nginx. So I met him. I'd never heard of him. Actually, that was the first time I heard of Netscape, because everyone was still using Mosaic browser at the time. This was 1994. And that was quite a profound moment. I decided, what am I doing studying for a PhD? I'm going to become a professor, and just this is not the track.
Where was university?
It was Madison, Wisconsin. So it was University of Wisconsin.
By the way, Jeff Madoff, that's where he graduated.
Yeah. He's been a guest on the show. He's not just a mutual friend. He's also a past guest. So I was profoundly affected by meeting Rob, and decided I was going to drop out of my PhD. And a couple months later, I did. And then I'd say there was maybe not a moment, but more of a realization in 95 when I was, or maybe 96, I became pretty adept at understanding just how to reverse engineer things. And Google didn't exist yet. It was Alta Vista and Lycos and Web Crawler and InfoSeek and all that. And I just found it ridiculous to create these separate pages for each of the search engines to optimize for each the unique algorithm that each engine had. I thought that was kind of a sketchy thing, waste of time and not really above board. And then Google came out, and it was markedly better than anything else. And I'm like, I'm going to reverse engineer this. I'm going to figure this out. I want to know Google better than Google engineers know it. We went from being more of a web design and development agency and marketing agency to really specializing in SEO over those next few years. And yeah, that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. Since a lot of my clients are going to be watching this, I'm going to ask you two questions. They actually go together. But who's your favorite type of check writer client that avails themselves of your skill? And what's your favorite type of project for them?
I'm going to preface this by saying I love your answer to this first question. Slow learners with money. That's not my answer.
Slow learners with cash. Yeah, committed slow learners with cash. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's people who are making a difference in the world, who are revealing light in the world. And, I used to be focused on the big brands. I'd get like Chanel, Sony, Zappos, Volvo as clients. And that was my ego. And so now it's really the change makers and kind of the light bearers in the world, the folks who are making the world a better place. And they could be small, they could be a 7-figure business and not $1 billion business. Doesn't matter. And what was your second question?
And what's your favorite type of project for your favorite type of people?
Yeah. So favorite type of project is one where I have to reverse engineer something or figure something out that is an interesting challenge, and one that has a significant payoff for the client and for the world.
Mm-hmm. And how would you measure? I mean, one of the things I'm really big on is I think the human brain responds to two things. It responds to an event that happens, and there was clear proof that it hadn't happened, and then there's clear proof that it had happened. And the other thing's got a number attached to it that's a better number. When you measure the result, it's a better number than you had before. And I tell people that if you have goals and you don't have an event and you don't have a number, it's just a bumper sticker for the brain. It's just filtered through. Yeah. So you're probably looking at responses from search. I'm guessing here.
Yeah.
What it meant, but you have to be really, really clear how we're going to know.
That's right.
That what we've undertaken is really successful, and what are you able to do after we get the result that you can't do right now?
Yep. So the most important thing to understand going into an engagement is what is the metric for success for that particular client. So one of my clients is Jay Abraham's cousin. And he has a law firm in Indianapolis. And for that client, I know that the needle moving number that matters is number of signed cases per month. Okay. So if we hit a certain number, that's a good result. He's happy. If we hit an outstanding number, I know what that is too, then he's over the moon happy. And then there's this pie in the sky kind of like, wow. Like there is one moment where, and I actually have an interview of him on my other show on Marketing Speak, which is all kind of SEO and online marketing type topics. So I interviewed Brandon on that show, and he shared how 10 months into the engagement, we had already set a record of number of signed cases in their 40-some year history, because his father actually founded the firm in the, I think, 60s or something. Or 70s. I forget when exactly, but it was many decades of not hitting the number that we hit the month that we recorded that episode. That was really cool. So, and each client is different, so if it's an e-commerce site, if it's a services company, if it's a news site, a media site, they're all different metrics. And also the different stakeholders that I'm working with will have different numbers. So somebody in the marketing department will have a different set of goals and objectives.
So you essentially create a new algorithm, right, from your reverse engineering. I'm starting to learn what algorithms are because the Patent Bureau is very, very partial to algorithms. That if you do this and you do this and you do this and you do this, you get this result,
Right. And it's, something very meta is happening right now in history where the algorithms are writing the algorithms. It's like that whole thing back to an earlier concept we talked about at the beginning of this episode was, being a good thinker about your thinking and being conscious about your consciousness or aware about your awareness. This is, kind of related to that too.
Yeah. I think actually I've been talking a lot about AI with a lot of different people who are varying degrees of skill and knowledge about AI. And I said, we keep talking about artificial intelligence, but I said, I think the greatest breakthroughs that we're going to experience, let's say over the next quarter century, are really how the brain actually works, how humans. And it's not an information processor, it's something else. It's a meaning maker. Our brain is something that takes experience and mysteriously creates meaning for the person who's doing the thinking, but also meaning for other people when they hear it. And I think this is inexhaustible. I think this is endless.
Yeah.
And we may be at the start of a great philosophical age and what I see signs of this is that I think things in technology, obviously, and certain types of technology are speeding up. But I got a sense that from a cultural standpoint and from how people are living their lives, I'm sensing a profound sense. We'd really like to slow things down. And I think part of it is falling birth rate around the planet. Most of the developed countries 40 years ago just basically stopped having babies. And the settler nations, which are Canada, the United States, Australia and New Zealand, all British, former British colonies, they can control population through immigration, legal or illegal. They can always keep their populations where they want them. But the vast majority of people who are very ethnocentric societies, they don't give citizenship membership to people who are immigrants. It could take generations for you to do this. But I got a sense that all the predictions of things constantly speeding up and everything else, I think that's actually controlled by human purpose. And we kind of I kind of want to slow things down a bit, and everything else. And I think the reason we want to slow things down is so we can think about them.
Well, and also enjoy them, right? So there's the slow food movement, right? So there are all these things where if you really savor the moment, then you're in the moment. You're in the eternal now and not living in the past, present, or future. You're just in the now. That's all that there is.
And friendship goes along. You do this with your friends. Yeah. You enjoy moments with your friends. And
in a flow state, let's say you're, hella skiing or something like that. You're also in the moment right then and there. Yeah.
And I think COVID gave us a little sample of this. They're having trouble filling jobs. And I was saying you gave some people like 2 years to think about their job, and they came up with the verdict that it was a really shitty job. It was a really shitty organization. It was really a terrible, shitty and terrible commute and everything else. Why was I doing that? But things were too fast to even think about it. And I think that now that we're more unified and connected to each other, we can influence each other's behavior a bit more than we could.
Yeah. I'd say we are a more connected world now. This was really fabulous. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, I certainly would like to. I certainly would like to do this again.
All right, perfect. Well, I only covered a small fraction of the questions I actually had for you. So let's do it. I'll get in touch with my assistant. We'll get in touch with your assistant, and we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And for our listener who's interested in strategic coach and all the incredible thinking tools and identifying their unique ability and really tuning into that and utilizing everyone else's unique ability in their organizations, where should we send them to?
Yeah, it's just, we've got a great website. It's called Strategic. I don't know if anybody uses www anymore.
No,
Strategic Coach.
Strategiccoach.com.
Strategiccoach.com. We got a great website, and it's filled with videos and audios, and there's explanations of how the program works, and where you can say, I'd really like to have someone talk to me about this and everything else. But we're a successful company. We're 35 years now. We had 2 flat years and 33 profitable years. So it's worked really, really well. And I'm 80, and I'm making plans on our growth for when I'm age 100. So I'm in this for a bit.
You're in it for the long haul.
Health is good. Health is good. I pay attention to the right tests, and everything's good. But Stephan, a real joy.
Likewise.
And anyway, thanks for reaching out.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. And thank you, listener. We'll catch you on the next episode. Have a fantastic week. In the meantime, I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.